Now, in our 25th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1338, with a release and air date of Saturday, October 19th, 2024. Please take the programme to your air following the cue tone.
On the air on the amateur bands around the Earth, and streaming on the Internet since 1993, serving the amateur radio community with weekly, reliable, amateur radio news and special features, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the Earth as we come to air with edition number 1338 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The Wireless Institute of Australia announces plans to harmonise the 40-metre band in International Amateur Radio Union Region 3 and beyond. The broadcaster who reported his transmitter and tower missing a few months ago dies. Meanwhile, a hot air balloon strikes a radio tower, causing it to collapse. The FCC proposes a steep fine for ESPN, who used the national emergency alert tones in promos for NBA games. SpaceX tells the FCC it has plans to make Starlink 10 times faster. Russia's state-run television and radio networks are struck by a cyberattack. Jamboree on the Air brings scouts worldwide together on the air. The 2024 Radio Orienteering Championship is held in Michigan. We will have the results. NASA engineers shut down systems on Voyager 2 to conserve power. The FCC gives Starlink the green light to activate direct-to-device cell service from orbit. And a teen in Romania sets a new CW speed record. It's amazing, and we will have the numbers for you in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, Feed K6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will show us several surprises that change you forever. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, will be here with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, we climb aboard the Wayback Machine to the early 1900s as the first transcontinental one-way message relay occurred, and shortly thereafter, the first two-way transcontinental message made it into League headquarters. We will hear the story in a segment he entitled Transcons. We will stop by and visit with Bill Salyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DX expeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside Albany, New York, where the fall colors and warm temperatures at their peak this week, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting this week from the ham shack of K2MST inside the Museum of Science and Technology in downtown Syracuse, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, just back from the Chattanooga Ham Fest, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
Reporting live from our news bureau in western Massachusetts, where the trees have donned their finest fall attire. So grab your hot cider and enjoy the vibrant hues. I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our Trade New York News Bureau, where it's apple picking season, I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where it's been frosty for 3 days in a row, and now we're in a beautiful period of clear Indian summer. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where autumn finally showed up, bringing Old Man Winter along for the ride, but summer will be returning for a last late appearance. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now, as our lead story, here is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
Leading off our news this week, a story that takes us to International Amateur Radio Union Region 3, where a study of the 40-meter band's varied allocations has produced a proposal to harmonize the band. The recommendations could ultimately have a far-reaching effect to even broader harmonization with IARU Regions 1 and 2. Following the 40-meter band plan harmonization consultation conducted by the Wireless Institute of Australia, discussions have taken place within the International Amateur Radio Union 3 HF Band Plan Committee over the WIA findings. The IARU Region 3 Subcommittee has now taken into consideration the work of the WIA and has decided that it would be beneficial to all if the Region 3 Subcommittee deliver the new IARU perspective paper directly into the IARU Region 3 Conference to be held in Thailand this coming November. This approach was proposed so that all member societies can engage freely in discussion on the proposals at the conference, including the WIA, based on whatever local feedback they receive. For the WIA, it means that they will not be directly proposing the changes to the conference, thus giving them more freedom at the conference to act in the best interests of all radio amateurs in Australia. The IARU's proposal is the result of a recent consultation by the Wireless Institute of Australia with the goal of finding band plans for various modes that could ultimately form the basis of a global agreement. The committee noted in its report that one of its biggest challenges was to settle on an equitable redistribution of use of the spectrum based on activity and demand within the various modes. The proposal noted that very little spectrum is set aside for the digital modes and discusses the potential use of channelization of the bands for digital modes. To deal with the challenge of allocations that include SSB and CW, the committee studied, among other things, activity shown on Club Log. In addition to its intent to change some things, the committee reaffirmed the need to retain certain long-standing rules: the start of CW operation from the bottom of the band, and SSB operation from the top, with data modes occupying the boundary area between the two. The proposal asks for accommodations for emergency traffic so as to limit the possibility of QRM from other amateur activity. The WIA therefore invites its members and interested radio amateurs in Australia to provide feedback on the new IARU Region 3 paper to WIA, which can then be taken forth to the conference. Amateurs in other countries within Region 3 should do likewise through their regional IARU member associations.
The Alabama broadcaster who told police his AM radio station tower was stolen last February has died. Brett Elmore, owner and general manager of WJLX in Jasper, Alabama, made headlines after reporting to authorities that the station's transmitter and 200-foot stainless steel AM tower and copper hardline had been stolen mysteriously overnight. The case has not been solved. News reports gave no cause of the broadcaster's death. He was 41. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, more trouble for broadcast radio towers. The tower of an AM radio station in Albuquerque collapsed after being struck by a hot air balloon from the nearby International Balloon Fiesta on Friday, October 11th. The talk radio station, KKOB 770 AM, shut off its 50,000-watt transmitter as the pilot and his passengers, two young boys, descended a ladder on the tower near where the balloon had become entangled. No injuries were reported. The station stayed on the air at 96.3 FM. Local news media reported that, ironically, it was 20 years ago to the day that another balloon, also bearing the likeness of Smokey Bear, crashed into the same tower.
Now, in our 25th year of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
The FCC has proposed a fine of $146,976 against ESPN for 6 violations of the Emergency Alert System rules. The agency cited an ESPN promo for the start of the 2023-24 NBA season that transmitted emergency signals. Agency rules prohibit such transmissions in an absence of an actual emergency. Loyan A. Igal, the FCC's Enforcement Bureau chief, said in a statement, quote, "These types of violations can raise substantial public safety concerns by causing confusion and in some cases interfering with the legitimate emergency use. Today's proposed fine reflects the FCC's commitment to keep the lines clear when it comes to proper use of tools that broadcasters are entrusted with to assist the public during an emergency." According to the FCC, ESPN acknowledged that it transmitted a promo spot of a total of 6 times during October 20 through the 24th of 2023 on 2 ESPN-owned networks. The agency said ESPN has a history of non-compliance with the emergency system rules, noting fines in 2015 and 2021. Those previous violations played a factor in the agency seeking the maximum allowed fines for the latest incident.
SpaceX is seeking approval for changes to Starlink that the company says will enable gigabit per second broadband service. In an application submitted to the Federal Communications Commission on October 11th, SpaceX claims that the requested modification and its companion amendment will enable the Gen 2 system to deliver gigabyte speed, truly low latency broadband, and ubiquitous mobile connectivity to all Americans and the billions of people globally who still lack access to adequate broadband. SpaceX said it is seeking several small but meaningful updates to the orbital configuration and operational parameters for its Gen 2 space station authorization to improve space sustainability, better respond to evolving demand, and more efficiently share spectrum with other spectrum users. SpaceX also wants to lower the altitude of satellites at 525, 530, and 535 kilometers to 480, 485, and 475 kilometers altitude, respectively. The reconfiguration will increase the potential maximum number of orbital planes and satellites per plane while keeping the planned total number of second-generation satellites at 29,988 or less. The FCC has so far approved 7,500 Gen 2 satellites. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk wrote this week that the next-generation Starlink satellites, which are so big that only Starship can launch them, will allow for a 10-fold increase in bandwidth and, with the reduced altitude, faster latency. As for actual speeds in 2024, Starlink's website says users typically experience download speeds between 25 and 220 megabits per second, with a majority of users experiencing speeds over 100 megabits per second. Upload speeds are typically between 5 and 20 megabits per second. Latency ranges between 25 and 60 milliseconds on land and 100 plus milliseconds in certain remote locations. Another request would change the elevation angles of satellites to improve network performance, SpaceX said. SpaceX seeks to lower its minimum elevation angle from 25 degrees to 20 degrees for satellites operating between 400 and 500 kilometer altitude, SpaceX told the FCC. Reducing the minimum elevation angle in this way will enhance customer connectivity by allowing satellites to connect to more Earth stations directly and to maintain connections with Earth stations for a longer period of time while flying overhead. Meanwhile, upgrades to Starlink's Gen 2 satellites will feature enhanced hardware that can use higher gain and more advanced beamforming and digital processing technologies and provide more targeted and robust coverage for American consumers, SpaceX said.
The 19th annual ARRL online auction, sponsored by RT Systems Incorporated, got underway on Friday, October 18th at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The auction continues through Thursday, October 24th. With more details on this year's auction, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ at League Headquarters.
A preview of the items that will be up for bid is open now. This year's auction features over 200 items and includes ARRL product review equipment, vintage books, new donations, ARRL lab-tested donations, and the ever-popular ARRL lab mystery boxes. You can visit the auction website, register to bid, and check out details on the items available so you'll be ready to place a bid on your favorites. Plus, keep an eye on the ARRL Facebook page and Instagram for featured products and auction highlights throughout the event. Prospective bidders must register and create an account. Your ARRL.org user ID and password will not work on the auction site. Registration is a one-time action. If you have previously registered for the ARRL online auction, you could use the same username and password to sign into this year's auction. If you've forgotten your username or password, just click on the Help tab for assistance. And it's not necessary to register to browse the items for sale on the site, and you can register at any time during the auction at ARRL online auction. ARRL's annual online auction is an important fundraiser and a critical means of support for ARRL educational programming. Auction proceeds ensure the continuation of programs that support licensing of new hams, as well as amateur radio emergency service training and enhancements to technical and operating education for all ARRL members and the greater amateur radio community. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
If you don't want to bid, but still would like to contribute to the ARRL Education and Technology Fund, visit arrl.org/donate. For more information about the ARRL auction, contact Lisa Tardet, KB1MOI, via email.
The Federal Communications Commission gave Starlink and T-Mobile emergency authority to provide satellite-to-phone coverage in areas hit by Hurricane Helene. SpaceX and T-Mobile have been given emergency special temporary authority to enable Starlink satellites with direct-to-cell capability to provide coverage for cell phones in the affected areas of Helene. SpaceX said yesterday the satellites have already been enabled and started broadcasting emergency alerts to cell phones on all networks in North Carolina. In addition, we may test basic SMX texting capability for most cell phones on the T-Mobile network in North Carolina. SpaceX warned of limits since the service isn't ready for commercial rollout yet. SpaceX's direct-to-cell constellation has not been fully deployed, so all services to be delivered will be on a best-effort basis, the company said. Starlink is being used to provide wireless emergency alerts to cell phones from all carriers in North Carolina, according to Ben Longmire, Senior Director of Satellite Engineering for SpaceX. We are closely monitoring Hurricane Milton and standing by ready to take action in Florida, he wrote. The FCC said the approval enables SpaceX to operate supplemental coverage from space in the 1910 to 1915 megahertz and 1990 to 1995 megahertz band, which are leased from T-Mobile in areas affected by the Hurricane Helene. An FCC spokesperson said that the approval is for all areas affected by Helene, although it's only active in North Carolina so far. The FCC also said that it's granting special temporary authorities to licensees and issuing rule waivers to help communications providers maintain and restore service, support emergency operations, and assist in public safety, including search and rescue efforts. Separately, the FCC last week waived certain Lifeline program eligibility rules to help people in the disaster area apply for discount phone and broadband service. SpaceX began launching satellites with direct-to-cell applications in January of 2024 and showed a demo of text messages sent between T-Mobile phones via one of Starlink's low Earth orbit satellites. T-Mobile has said the Starlink service for phones will help cover gaps in areas where it has no coverage due to terrain limitations, land use restriction, and other factors.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Russian state media company VGTRK, which owns and operates the country's main national TV and radio stations, was targeted in a massive cyber attack coinciding with President Vladimir Putin's birthday. The website of VGTRK, the all-Russian state television and radio broadcasting company, was not loading early on Monday, and its Rossiya 24 rolling 24 hours news channel was not available online. Online broadcasting and internal services are down, and even the internet and telephone are not working. It's going to take a long time to fix, one source said. Speaking in Moscow, Maria Zakharova, a spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry, did not say who was behind the attack but told reporters that Russian media has long since become targets. Moscow would raise the cyber attack in all international forums, including at UNESCO, the UN agency which promotes freedom of speech, Zakharova said.
The big weekend for Scouts around the world is here. Jamboree on the Air, or JOTA, and Jamboree on the Internet, or JODI, is the world's largest scouting event. With more details on this annual event, we go to John Ross, KD8 IDJ, with this report from League headquarters.
The three-day event runs from October 18th through the 20th, 2024, using amateur radio and the Internet to connect Scouts worldwide for a full weekend of on-air and online activities that promote friendship and global citizenship. In 2023, JOTA and JOTI had a record of 600,000 registered participants. That's a 40% increase compared to 2022, and included 7,000-plus scout groups and tens of thousands of individual participants from 149 countries. When Scouts contact each other by amateur radio, the stations are operated by licensed amateur radio operators, but many Scouts and their leaders hold licenses and have their own stations. But the majority participate in JOTA through stations operated by local radio clubs and individual radio amateurs. Some operators use television or computer-linked communication. This technology offers Scouts the exciting opportunity to make friends in other countries without leaving home. Since 1958, when the first Jamboree on the Air was held, millions of Scouts have met each other through this event. Many contacts made during JOTA have resulted in pen pals and links between Scout troops that have lasted for many years. Participating in JOTI, Scouts of any age can take part, from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts and Venturers. Scouts may participate at home with the help of an adult, or they can participate in a Scout group at a council event. JOT is an economical way to participate in an international jamboree, and participation fulfills requirements for Tiger and Arrow of Light Adventurers, the Citizenship in the World Merit Badge, and the International Spirit Award.
I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
More information about JOTA and JODI, including rules, regulations, call signs, and worldwide frequencies, can be found at Jamboree on the Air on the ARRL website. Additional information is available in the JOTA and JODI Ham Radio Handbook.
As we come to air this week, public radio and TV stations are getting an extra dose of federal funds to strengthen their ability to operate during disasters. With disaster resiliency on almost everyone's mind in the United States, the Federal Emergency Management Agency has made an additional $40 million available to public radio and TV stations to permit them to upgrade their infrastructure. The money is being released through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The funds are designed to permit radio stations investments in new transmitters, generators, backup power supplies, antennas, and related equipment for handling emergency messages. The equipment is capable of handling messages through the federal agency's integrated public alert and warning system and its common alerting protocol. For TV stations, the funds are to support training their personnel in the use of the new or upgraded equipment. According to the article in trade publication Radio World, FEMA has already released 2 rounds of funding to public broadcasters. This third round will mean that $136 million has been spent during the course of 3 fiscal years to assist public media's capabilities during disasters.
The 23rd USA and 12th International Amateur Radio Union Region 2 Radio Orienteering Championships were held October 5th through the 13th. Brought together more than 50 competitors from 13 U.S. states, as well as participants from Canada, Australia, Uganda, and China. Set in the scenic parks and forests near Chelsea, Dexter, Pinckney, and Brighton, Michigan, the event was organized by the Southern Michigan Orienteering Club, with communications and logistics help from the Chelsea Amateur Radio Club, an ARRL-affiliated club. Radio orienteering, or amateur radio direction finding, blends navigation using a map and a compass with radio transmitter hunting. This sport not only provides a challenging competition, but also has practical applications in search and rescue, wildlife tracking, and defense communications. Competitors facing difficult terrain, signal reflections, and elite-level navigation challenges, while beginners are welcomed with coaching and a 2-day training camp held before the championships. A highlight was search and rescue exhibitions featuring Civil Air Patrol volunteers. Medals were awarded across various categories with standout performances in both women's and men's divisions. These results will factor into the selection of Team USA for the next World Amateur Radio Direction Finding Champions. For complete results, photos, and further details, visit RadioOrienteeringChamps, all one word, .us.
If you've ever operated an amateur radio station remotely via the internet, you have Keith LaMonica, W7DXX, to thank. The former broadcaster, who was the recipient of numerous awards, including the noted Peabody Award, was perhaps best known among hams for working with another amateur, Bob Arnold, N2JEU, to establish an internet-controlled base for amateur radio, enabling the radio operators without antennas to get on the air remotely with computers. This groundbreaking station was profiled in a 1999 article in CQ magazine. Both Keith and Bob were inducted into CQ's Hall of Fame in 2016. Keith died on Thursday, September 26th, following a serious illness, according to a notice on QRZ.com. His accomplishments as a ham started very early on in his life, when he made front-page news in the local California newspaper for being the first person in the area to hear radio transmissions being sent by the Soviet satellite Sputnik. A satellite enthusiast, he developed the satellite radio talk show as a format, creating a program known as FM America. He also hosted a Sun Broadcast Network radio talk show. His long professional career in radio and TV had him crisscrossing the U.S. markets from the East Coast to the West Coast. The Peabody Award was presented to him for his coverage of the trial of James Earl Ray, who was convicted of the assassination of the U.S. civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968. Keith was 81.
On Friday, October 25th, 2024, the University of Scranton will dedicate a state-of-the-art amateur radio station that serves students in the university's W3 USR Amateur Radio Club. The station is used for physics courses and research by students and faculty participating with the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, or HAMSCI project led by Nathaniel Frizzle, Ph.D., W2 NAF, Associate Professor of Physics and Engineering at Scranton. Research conducted using the facility has been supported by grants from the National Science Foundation, NASA, the Amateur Radio Digital Communications Foundation, and other organizations. Located on the 5th floor of the Loyola Science Center, the main station has floor-to-ceiling glass walls with sweeping views of the city of Scranton. Last academic year, a 40-foot tower with HF antenna for 14, 21, and 28 megahertz, as well as VHF and UHF satellite and microwave antennas, some with rotating mounts, were installed in addition to heavy-duty controllers, all-mode transceivers, speakers, desktop microphones, and other components. A public dedication ceremony, station open house, and ticketed buffet dinner are planned. More information is available at scranton.edu/W3USR-dedication.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
And recording from Mafate Island in Vanuatu, I'm Savo, YJ0SA. We have been in Vanuatu for about 5 days now. We have over 4,500 QSOs thanks to the new SuperFox mode. We started with 6 antennas and are down 1, however we are looking to set up some more. Our buddy Hex fell down in the night due to high winds. The telescoping mast is no longer usable in its current condition. However, we are working on a plan to still make use of the Buddy Hex before too long. We are constantly switching bands due to issues beyond our control. On the third day, we started experiencing power failures while trying to bring the ACOM amplifier on the air. To be added to our email list for routine updates, please visit the YJ0VV page on QRZ. And be sure to look for us in the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest on October 26th and 27th. For more information, visit our webpage at bit.ly/N4VGE. Again, that's bit.ly/N4VGE.
This Week in Amateur Radio is presenting another chapter of A Century of Amateur Radio, Hams, Organizations, Events, Inventions, from the mind of Chris Cordella, W2PA, and his editing team. Each episode will bring a different aspect of early amateur radio history. Coming up here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. Over the past few weeks, we have discussed some techniques that might allow you to work the DX that is in the pileup. I have one more thing to pass along to you. This was given to me by Wayne, K8LEE, who now is sadly a silent key. He suggested that I keep a few index cards handy. On the index card, spread some vertical tick marks on the horizontal axis, and below each mark put +1, +2, +3, etc. up to 10. And maybe a few before the start, so -2, -1, etc. You could also use +3, +5, +8 for sideband. When you're listening to a pileup, pay particular attention to where the station was that was just work and where they transmitted. If it were, say, 3 kc off the calling frequency, just put a small check mark under the +3. Then listen and track the operator. We are all creatures of habits, and it will help know where the operator might call next. I recently used this technique last week with PX0FF, and the operator used the following repetitive pattern several times: +2, +4, +5, +6, +9, and then he started over. And it might be plus or minus half a kc, but that was the general pattern. I was able to move to a spot +9, and I worked him there. He was sending up, but didn't say how much. And honestly, when I worked him at +9, there was no one else around. I have an index card for another operator that I track closely, and he would go +2, +4, +6, and then -2, and then start over. If you listen down to, no one was there. It was easy to work. And I don't know if that was his way of getting his friends to work him or what, but he would go up the band and then drop down below and then start over. I'm sure that this seems very simple, but I'm easily distracted, and it does help me focus on what the operator was doing. Of course, if you know me, the one word that I continue to stress is listen. So the key to all of this is listening. I hope this helps. Often people will ask me if there's a written copy of the information that I present here. There are so many call signs, dates, and URLs being discussed that you can never remember them until such time as you could write them down. I use most of the same data that you hear in the DX Corner for the weekly DX column in the Ohio Section Journal. If you just Google ARRL Ohio Section, you will find the Ohio Section website, and you can subscribe to the weekly journal and get most of this information. The actual website is arrl-ohio.org. This is a free journal, and you don't need to be an ARRL member to receive it. You won't get the well-rounded information that you will get from This Week in Amateur Radio podcast, but you will get this DX information. So here's what's happening in the world of DX. This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Well, we have some news from a friend in Vietnam. Quote, "After 14 years of fun as 3 Whiskey 3 Bravo, it was time to renew my license and to comply with the new government regulations," said Bruce. Bruce is also known as AA4XR, HS0ZCY, and XU7ADF. He is now XV9 Baker, so instead of 3 Whiskey 3 Baker, Bruce is XV9 Baker. From the Centro Radio Aficionados of Montevideo, the Uruguay DX group should be QRV by now from Mozambique. They will continue until October 24th. Uruguayan radio amateurs will be active with the call sign Charlie 91 Bravo Victor on CW, sideband RTTY, and FT8. They described this as a, quote, vacation-style activity. They said, after too long without traveling with radio since our 2019 5 Whiskey Zero Hotel activity in Samoa, finally getting the group together has overcome several difficulties such as getting authorizations to transmit, paying for expensive visas, obtaining yellow fever vaccination certificates, buying different tickets and coordinating stopovers, renting hotels, transportation, etc. They plan to be active with 2 100-watt stations, a Moxon antenna for 17 and 12, a multiband spider beam, and 2 end-fed long wires for 40 through 6 CW, sideband RTTY, and FT8, depending on the conditions and the demand for these various bands. They will also be on 28.4 megahertz, 28.4 meg daily for schedules with friends back home in Uruguay. Delta Fox 2 Whiskey Oscar Harald is currently QRV from Rwanda as 9 X-Ray 2 Alpha Whiskey through October 23rd. He has a Yaesu FT991, a multi-band dipole, a bamboo hex beam, and a 40-element Yagi for 6 meters. He will also have a dish for QO100, so I hope you work him. The first 6 Nauru C21mm team members arrived midweek and got straight to work. Quote, after another overnight flight and nearly no sleep, we installed the 2-element wire beam on Wednesday local evening and started Charlie 21 Mike in the dark with 3 stations on 20 and 10. Their hotel did not allow radio operations, so they booked an Airbnb about 1 kilometer away. This QTH is not perfect, as there are some higher hills to the west. Internet and QRM noise are fine. Still, conditions are very poor. They also say that we had some problems with different FTA programs, but hope to get it improved soon. No success with new Superfox. I've already worked those guys a couple times, and there's a bunch of great operators, so good luck. G3XTT Don, also known as 5 X-Ray 1 Delta Fox, says that he is returning to Uganda November 13th to the 27th. The group will be in the CQ Worldwide DX Contest CW, and Don will be on 40 meters. They expect to be QRV prior to the contest on various bands, Don on CW, and probably some FT8. You can QSL Don on his home call, which is G3XTT. Jean-Marc, F5 SGI, will be on Reunion Island November 7th to the 18th, QRV on CW only on 40 through 10. His call will be Fox Radio stroke F5 SGI. QSLs will automatically be sent via the Bureau and Logbook of the World. If you need Antarctica, here's your chance. Look for F4 FKT David to be QRV again as FT4 Yankee Mike in his spare time during his next work assignment. He departs France on October 24th and expects to arrive on site at the beginning of November. During this, his 4th trip to the White Continent, he will be, quote, based in Concordia until the end of January 2025. David will be active on 20, 17, and 15 sideband RTTY, FT8, and SSTV. So if you need Antarctica, David's a very good operator, so you should pick that up. And can you imagine if your friend said, hey, where's your next business trip? I got to go to Concordia, Antarctica for 2 months. But I'm glad he does. Jose, TI2JJP, is currently on Cocos Island as TI9. Jose took with him a rig and a wire and obtained permission from Costa Rica's National Park Service to stay at the main house on the island. So far, his activity has been on 10-meter FT8. However, while trying to set up the FT8 program, Jose apparently set up this call sign as TI9/I2 instead of TI2. Carlos called Jose on a satellite phone to inform him of the error, and it has now been corrected. So I hope you get it. Cocoskeeling is a little bit rare. So I also have a Papa X-Ray 0 FF Fernando de Noronha update. Quote, we just passed 80,000 QSOs. The noise situation on 160s didn't get any better last night. We will relocate the Europe-Asia beverage today and hope that it's better. We have mixed feelings about 50 megahertz yesterday. The 50.313 spectrum was completely overloaded with stations. However, it was difficult to complete contact because everybody kept calling with their grid square and not moving forward with a report. That blocked us minute after minute after minute and was very disappointing to watch. Trying to QSY to 50.316 was only understood by very few stations and more time was lost. When such a big opening happens again, please watch the DX cluster closely to understand what we need. Billy, F4GJE, C5RK will be active from the Gambia January 4th to the 5th, 2025. He will then go to Senegal 6 Whiskey 1 Radio Delta January 11th to 12th. For both, he says he will be on 80 through 10 depending on propagation, sideband and FT8, FT4. JD1BQP from Ogasawara will be active again by JP1 IHD on Chichichimi Island, IOTA Asian AS-031, October 21 to November 3rd, so possibly by the time you hear this, he'll be QRV, including the CQ Worldwide DX sideband contest. On the weekends, the FT4 and FT8 modes will be added to single sideband with a focus on 15, 12, 10, and 6. So good luck getting Ogasawara. As most of you know, there is a civil war in Sudan since mid-April of 2023. One of the operators, a friend, ST2M Magdi, was stuck on Tudi Island, an island at the point where the White Nile and the Blue Nile rivers merge, for the past 19 months. However, he recently returned to Babur and is in good health. So good luck to you, Magdi, and I hope things get settled out and life returns a little bit. If you are someone who likes podcasts and or YouTube episodes, the DX Mentor has new podcast YouTube segments to review. The first is with the DXpedition to San Tome and Principe S9 Zulu. The second is with the upcoming 3 Delta 2 Yankee DXpedition to Rotuma. Check them out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for the DX Mentor. So I know the ARL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I sometimes mention are redundant. However, these are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that may be otherwise difficult to get. The contest to prepare for is the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest at the end of October, October 26th and 27th. The side benefit to both this contest and the CQ Worldwide CW contest at the end of November is the DX that you can work before and after the contest. Before the contest, contesters are going to remote locations and will spend considerable time on the air testing their rigs, antennas, and propagation. After the contest, they often hang around for a few days enjoying the location they are at and spending more time on the air. It is a great time to fill band slots and to pick up an all-time new one. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 17th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of ham radio. Hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. I want to extend our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us the use of his website in the preparation of these programs. Now here is the next chapter of ham radio history. Transcons. As 1916 drew to a close, Maxim made a plea to organize what might be the first round-trip relay across the country. The February Washington's birthday test had demonstrated relaying a message to the entire country broadcast style beginning in the Midwest. This one would be more difficult. A message originated on the East Coast would be relayed across the country, arrive at a West Coast station where a reply would be sent, which would then be relayed back to the origin, twice spanning the continent in a single relaying test, perhaps all in one night. Maxim compared it to the first telephone call and the first coast-to-coast automobile trip. The first one of those was accomplished in 1903 by Horatio Nelson Jackson, a physician, and Sewell K. Crocker, a mechanic who drove from San Francisco to New York in a little over 1 month. Actually, he was not certain it hadn't already been done, but no record of one had yet surfaced, only rumors. Since reports of successful contacts along many individual parts of the path had become common, he reasoned, it should be possible to stitch them all together. Noting the rapid progress in radio technology, Maxim wrote, "Things are being done nightly right now, which were impossible this time last year. What is coming by this time next year, no man is bold enough to guess, for in no art being practiced today is advance so rapid as in amateur wireless telegraphy." He had already taken the matter up with the trunk line managers and would be publishing a plan in the next issue of QST. But an attempt at a transcontinental relay happened before any plan made it into print. As a record for future generations to smile over, we herewith print that an attempt was made on 4th January 1917 after detailed preparation. Newspapers in Hartford and Hulick, Washington, were set to exchange a previously arranged question and answer that had been kept secret. Hartford would do the asking. Maxim at 1ZM was to start the exchange with Henry W. Blagen, 7DJ in Washington. Its failure was blamed primarily on excessive QRN, combined with an unusual lack of propagation between the Midwest 8HN, 9ZN, and others, and the Northeast 2ABG and 2AGJ. Personal accounts attested to horrible conditions and severe weather. Furthermore, 7ZC in Montana reported that the western leg had been in flux anyway, with this critical relay station having been notified of the test only 1 day in advance, and another 7ZH in the middle of a move. They would try again. Less than 2 weeks later, on 17 January, success! The first transcontinental one-way message relay occurred. 3 of them, in fact, all originated from the Seafred brothers sent to ARRL headquarters. The messages traveled via 5 hops: Seafred Brothers 6EA, Los Angeles, California; E.A. Smith 9ZF, Denver, Colorado; W.P. Corwin 9ABD, Jefferson City, Missouri; K. Hewitt 2AGJ, Albany, New York; H.P. Maxim 1ZM, Hartford, Connecticut, the longest hop being 1,040 miles from Jefferson City to Albany. But 9ZF was acknowledged as having been pivotal since his station was the only link along his segment. The others all had parallel routes available. The relays continued through early February. In all, 21 messages were passed, every one of which went through 9ZF. This was not along an already established trunk line, but no matter. It now was designated as such and assigned to Matthews and his northern line. Then, a couple of weeks later, in the early morning of 6 February, a round-trip relay was completed all in one night. The job was done by 2 p.m. Farron and Grinnan in New York City, 8JZ, Alfred J. Manning, Cleveland, Ohio, 9ABD, Willis P. Corwin, Jefferson City, Missouri, 9ZF, W. H. Smith, Denver, Colorado, and 6EA, Seafred Brothers, Los Angeles, California. The QST editorial proclaimed, "They are the big bugs of amateur wireless." 2 p.m. was highlighted later that year as the star of the 2nd District, the most efficient station in the East. They claim to be the only one in the heart of New York City engaged in long-distance work. Urban QRM and QRN normally drowned out weak signals. Previously, Eastern-originated messages had reached the West Coast in 3 days. Even earlier, they had gotten across on QST signals, that is, ones that were neither prearranged nor in some cases even acknowledged. This round-trip message left 2 p.m., the call sign not the time, at 1:40 a.m., and the response came back at 3 a.m., making the round trip in 1 hour 20 minutes. ARRL headquarters knew of 50 additional messages that had traveled along the trunk lines across the country. The editor correctly predicted that this new record would not last long. Maxim sent a radiogram to the New York Times on March 6th, announcing that the League was now handling round-trip, coast-to-coast messages in less than 2 hours. a reporter interviewed J.O. Smith, who was quoted emphasizing the volunteer nature of amateur radio, saying, "They are all amateurs, just bugs on wireless telegraphy, who gave up their spare hours and their money to the hobby." Smith, the new manager of Trunkline C&D, Herbert having recently become ARRL general manager, commented, "This great stride forward in amateur relay work over 1 year ago, undoubtedly due to the regenerative receiving sets now in use and the greater efficiency obtaining in amateur transmitting sets in general, tells its own story. The story would soon be rudely interrupted." Included in this material are quotes from the following: Hiram Percy Maxim, The First Transcontinental Relay, QST, December 1916, page 10. A.C. Campbell, First Transcontinental Relay Fails, QST, February 1917, page 40. Transcontinental Traffic Begins, QST, April 1917, page 18. The Transcontinental Record, QST, April 1917, page 17. The Star of the Second District, QST, August 1917, page 13. Amateur Wireless Crosses Continent, The New York Times, March 8, 1917. 9DC QRM, Radio Communications by the Amateurs, QST, March 1917, page 45. With appreciation to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Now, in our 25th year of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Every now and then you come across an idea that throws you for a loop. It comes seemingly out of nowhere, and once you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. It's a lot like a 1929 painting I like, called The Treachery of Images, also known as Ceci n'est pas une pipe, or in English, This is Not a Pipe, by Belgian surrealist painter René Magritte. If you're not familiar with it, it's a painting of a pipe. And by being a painting, it's not a pipe. Obviously. Before I go into the idea that rocked my world, I need to set the stage a little. There are several modes I've discussed before: Whisper or Weak Signal Propagation Reporter, FT8 or Frankie Taylor Design 8 FSK modulation, and plenty others. Each of these modes has one thing in common. They require that all participants are using the same time. That is, both sender and receiver need to agree on when now is for this to work. A whisper signal takes 110.6 seconds every 120 seconds, starting on the even minute. It requires that the transmitter and receiver agree on the time within about 2 seconds. An FT8 signal takes 12.6 seconds within a 15-second window. It requires an accuracy of about 20 milliseconds. These timekeeping requirements are pretty easy to achieve in a modern network-connected computer. You turn on a thing called NTP or Network Time Protocol, point it at an appropriate clock, and off you go. If you're not connected to the internet, then things get squirrely pretty quickly. You could buy yourself a GPS, set up a link between the GPS and your computer, run some software, and use the GPS clock to synchronize time on your computer. Of course, this requires a GPS, a serial cable, software, configuration, battery power to keep the GPS running, and probably a couple of other things. I've never done this, but given what I'm about to share, I don't think I ever will. What if you used a whisper or an FT8 signal from someone else to synchronize your clock? If you've ever launched WSJTX, you'll have seen a column marked DT. That's Delta Time, or the difference in time between the clock on your computer and that of the transmitter. If you could read the difference and use it to adjust your clock, you'd be in business. Charles, November Kilo 8 Oscar, pointed me to a GitHub gist with a single little Python script written by Peter, Kilo 6 Papa Lima, India. It updates the clock on your computer using the Delta time from WSJTX. I'd point you at the script from here, but 3 alpha 730575 and 24 more characters, and that's just one element of the URL, doesn't run quite off the tongue. So I've cloned it into my VK6FLAB GitHub repository where it's called WSJT Timesync. I added Peter's description to the README file, but I can take no credit for the effort or the idea. That's all Peter. So, synchronize your clock using the signal that you're trying to decode. Seems pretty obvious now, but that was a brand new notion for me. Of course, now I'm excited and wondering where else I might use this. Let me know if there's more to this that tickles your fancy. Also, just because I know Charles will poke my eye out with a Morse key if I don't mention this, you could use this script on your next POTA, Parks on the Air, or WWFF, Worldwide Flora and Fauna Activation, or anywhere else you go portable to make some noise. I know, right? Charles, using FT8 instead of Morse code. What's next? The end of the hobby? Tell you a secret. From time to time, he even uses his voice. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
The Federal Communications Commission is officially looking into broadband data caps and their impact on consumers. On Tuesday, the FCC approved a notice of inquiry to examine whether data caps harm consumers and competition, as well as why data caps persist despite increased broadband needs and the technical ability to offer unlimited data plans, as spotted earlier by Engadget. Many Internet plans come with a data cap that limits how much bandwidth you can use each month. If you go over the data cap, Internet service providers will typically charge an extra fee or slow down your service. The FCC first started inviting consumers to comment on broadband data caps last June, hundreds of which you can now read on the agency's website. You can still share your experience with broadband data caps with the FCC through an online form which will ask for details about the name of your ISP, usage limits, and any challenges you've encountered due to the cap. Rosenworcel is seeking input on the current state of data caps and if they harm competition or consumers' ability to access broadband internet, and review why data cap use continues to persist despite increased broadband needs of consumers and providers' demonstrated technical ability to offer unlimited data plans, the FCC said. For most people in the United States, rationing their internet usage would be unthinkable and impractical, FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel said in the press release. Restricting consumers' data can cut off small businesses from their customers, slap fees on low-income families, and prevent people with disabilities from using the tools they rely on to communicate.
The Amateur Radio on the International Space Station, or ARIS program, is seeking formal and informal education institutions and organizations, individually or working together, to host an amateur radio contact with a crew member on board the ISS. ARIS anticipates that the contact would be held between July 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2025. Crew scheduling and ISS orbits will determine the exact contact dates. To maximize these radio contact opportunities, ARIS is looking for organizations that will draw large numbers of participants and integrate the contact into a well-developed education plan. The deadline to submit the proposal is November 17, 2024. Proposal information and more details such as expectations, proposal guidelines, and the proposal form can be found at www.aris.org. Crew members aboard the International Space Station will participate in scheduled amateur radio contacts. These radio contacts are approximately 10 minutes in length and allow students to interact with the astronauts through a question and answer session. An ARIS contact is a voice-only communication opportunity via amateur radio between astronauts and cosmonauts aboard the space station, and classrooms and communities. ARIS contacts afford education audiences the opportunity to learn firsthand from astronauts what it is like to live and work in space, and to learn about space research conducted on the ISS. Students will also have an opportunity to learn about satellite communication, wireless technology, and radio science. Because of the nature of human spaceflight and the complexity of scheduling activities aboard the ISS, organizations must demonstrate flexibility to accommodate changes in dates and times of the radio contact. Amateur radio organizations around the world, with the support of NASA and space agencies in Russia, Canada, Japan, and Europe, present educational organizations with this opportunity. The ham radio organization's volunteer efforts provide the equipment and operational support to enable communication between crew on the ISS and students around the world using amateur radio. Please direct any questions to education@ariss-usa.org.
Congratulations are in order for software developer Skylar Erie and Zero GIS, who has joined the team at Amateur Radio Digital Communications as its new Director of Technology. Announcing his arrival on their website, ARDC called Skylar uniquely qualified for the post because of his long history in open-source software development, ham radio and wireless technology, and engineering management. He has been a licensed ham since 2011 and is a former member of the Auxiliary Communications Service in San Francisco, California, which operates in times of crisis. Skylar is the co-author of Mapping Hacks, published in 2005 by O'Reilly Media. The book explores the potential held by free and open-source geographic information systems. In Sonoma County, California, he was able to establish a cooperative that helped bring high-speed internet access to a rural community living in the coastal hills.
Serving the amateur radio community for a quarter century, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, heard around the world on the amateur bands and streaming on the internet.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. We have good news. The AMSAT Annual Space Symposium and General Meeting will take place as planned in Tampa. We are delighted that we do not have to reschedule the meeting. More information can be found at amsat.org. If you do attend the symposium, be sure to find me and say hi. If you enjoy APRS, there's a very good satellite that is operational as an APRS repeater. SONATE 2 is for you. It is operating continuously. There might be some interruptions when SSTV images are sent. What frequency, you ask? 145.825 MHz, up and down. This satellite also has the ability to transmit SSTV. The last series of images were transmitted the last few days of September. They will announce their SSTV operations on their X, formerly Twitter account, at JMU Space. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's solar weather and propagation report. Brought to us each week by our solar prognosticator Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington. Average daily sunspot numbers decreased from 160 to 129.3, and the average daily solar flux moved from 261.3 to 194.3. Geomagnetic numbers were higher, with the planetary A index rising from 21.4 to 39.3. 7 new sunspot groups emerged this week, with 2 on October 10th, 2 on October 13th, 2 more on October 14th and 1 more on October 15th. So looking ahead at the predicted solar flux for the near term, it will be 175 on October 19th. 180 on October 20th and 21st. 185 on October 22nd and 23rd. 220 on October 24th through the 26th. And 225, 245, 235, 260, 245 and 235 on October 27th through November 1st. Looking now at the predicted planetary A index for the near term, it will be 8 on October 20th. Then 5, 15, 12 and 5 on October 21st through the 24th. Followed by 5, 12 and 8 on October 25th through the 27th. Then hold steady at 5 on October 28th through November 8th.
In Radio Sport this week, a lot of great contest opportunities. October 17th through the 18th, it's the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest. That's CW. October 19th through the 20th, the ARRL EME contest, CW phone and digital. October 19th through the 20th as well, the JARTS WW RIDI contest, digital there. October 19th through the 20th, the YB DXPI FT8 contest, also digital. October 19th through the 20th, it's the 1010 International Fall Contest, that's CW. And October 19th through the 21st, the YLRL DXNA YL Anniversary Contest, that's CW phone and digital. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions, October 18th through the 20th, it's Pacificon, as we told you earlier, sponsoring the ARRL Pacific Division Convention. That's in San Ramon, California. November 2nd, it's the Wisconsin Aries Races Conference 2024, sponsoring the ARR Wisconsin State Convention. That's in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. November 2nd and 3rd, the Stone Mountain Ham Fest, sponsoring the ARRL Georgia State Convention in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And December 13th through the 14th, the Tampa Bay Ham Fest, sponsoring the ARRL West Central Florida Section Convention in Plant City, Florida. And don't forget to search the ARRL Ham Fest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
It's time once again for AMSAT satellite shorts from all over, and we begin this week with news from SpaceX. SpaceX is pausing its Falcon 9 launches again after the upper stage on the Crew 9 launch experienced an off-nominal deorbit burn that led to missing its expected landing zone in the ocean. Crew 9, along with its 2 empty seats for stranded astronauts Williams and Wilmore, successfully reached the ISS without issue. Next up is news about the 2025 SmallSat Conference. It's going to be scheduled for August 11th through the 13th, 2025, at the Salt Palace Convention Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. The theme for the conference is Reaching New Horizons and a New Orbit. Same mission, innovation, and growing demand are driving the increased use of small satellites across a diverse global ecosystem. Both government and commercial sectors are pursuing proliferated networked constellations for global monitoring and connectivity. National space agencies and academia use small satellites for exploration, science, and fundamental research. The conference organizers have put out the first call for papers and for exhibitors. Abstracts are due by February 4th, 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. More information is available on the web at smallsat.org. And finally this week, for those who missed the 2024 CubeSat Developers Workshop at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, California, last April, all recorded presentations are now available for viewing on YouTube. CPCL is Cal Poly's CubeSat laboratory, where the CubeSat standard originated and where the CubeSat design specification is maintained and published. In addition to providing the CDS, CPCL hosts the annual CubeSat Developers Workshop in San Luis Obispo and provides a central point for CubeSat community resources.
The Voyager 2 spacecraft's energy budget keeps dropping by about 4 watts per year as the plutonium in its nuclear power source is steadily dropping as the isotope decays. With 4 watts of power less to use by its systems per year, the decision was made to disable the plasma spectrometer, or PLS, instrument. As also noted by the NASA Voyager 2 team on Twitter, this doesn't leave the spacecraft completely blind to plasma in the interstellar medium, as the plasma wave subsystem is still active. The PLS was instrumental in determining in 2018 that Voyager 2 had in fact left the heliosphere and entered interstellar space. The PLS on Voyager 1 had already broken down in 1980 and was turned off in 2007. After saving the Voyager 1 spacecraft the past months from a dud memory chip and switching between increasingly clogged-up thrusters, it was now Voyager 2's turn for a reminder of the relentless march of time and the encroaching end of the Voyager missions. Currently, Voyager 2 still has 4 active instruments, but by the time the power runs out, they'll both be limping along with a single instrument, probably somewhere in the 2030s if their incredible luck holds. This incredible feat was enabled both by the hard work and brilliance of the generations of teams behind the 2 spacecraft, who keep coming up with new tricks to save power, and the simplicity of the radioisotope generators which keep both Voyagers powered and warm even in the depths of interstellar space.
A team of 161 amateur radio operators from 5 Midwest states assisted the 2,000 medical personnel volunteering for the Bank of America Chicago Marathon on October 13th, 2024. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, has more.
So 52,000 runners entered the event, and more than 100 countries were represented. This is the 16th year that amateur radio operators have partnered with the medical teams to help coordinate responses, arrange for medical resupplies, and provide situational awareness for the organizers. This year, digital mobile radio, DMR, was used by the pre-finish team, a group of 25 hams who are staged with medical personnel in a line about every 200 yards on the last mile of the course. There were more than 35 newly trained ham radio operators, and all were new to the event as well. Online training events were offered, and then the new operators were paired with more experienced personnel for the event. Organizers said that amateur radio is important to the marathon, but it's just one small component of a very complex event that requires 10,000 volunteers to be successful. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Amateur radio has a unique role and works alongside the other many specialty service groups required to support an event of this magnitude. We are grateful to the many hams who have shared their expertise, time, and resources over the years, said Robert Orr, volunteer lead for the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. This event has shown that ham radio is very much alive and doing well.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at www.twiar.net.
Pacificon 2024, the ARRL Pacific Division Ham Radio Convention and Hamfest, runs from October 18 through the 20th in San Ramon, California. The 3-day event features forums, an all-day antenna seminar, a 1-day technician license prep class, 2 days of license testing, and an outdoor swap meet. The ARRL National Instructor Gordon West at WB6NOA will teach the Ham Instructor Academy Saturday, October 19, from 8:15 to 10 a.m. ARRL officials and staff will be available at the booth with a special membership incentive. Special event station W1AW/6, sponsored by the Palo Alto Amateur Radio Association, will be in operation. PacificCon 2024 is hosted by the Mount Diablo Amateur Radio Club.
Combining the often separated worlds of faith and technology, the newly released book, Jesus, Faith and Antennas, by Gerald Tosh, offers an innovative perspective that bridges ham radio, electronics, and faith through a personal and technical journey. Aimed at amateur radio enthusiasts and readers interested in both technology and spirituality, this book provides a comprehensive guide to transmitting radio signals across multiple antennas while reflecting on life's deeper questions of belief, morality, and human connection. In Jesus, Faith and Antennas, the author takes readers on a dual journey, one through decades of hands-on experience with radio and electronics, and another into the more philosophical realms. The core of the book introduces a revolutionary technique for transmitting signals across multiple antennas, a method that challenges traditional amateur radio practices and is presented with clear step-by-step instructions. This practical guidance opens up new possibilities for hobbyists and professionals alike, especially those seeking innovative approaches to antenna configuration and signal transmission.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is wrapping up its final cohort for 2024. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with more.
8 educators from across the country have gathered at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut this week to learn how to incorporate radio technology into their lessons. 85 educators have gotten hands-on with radio technology through the program in 2024. On Thursday, October 10th, as Hurricane Milton's remnants continued to roar across Florida, the group decoded GOES satellite images of the storm. As the decoded signals were converted to images, there were exclamations of amazement in the conference room that serves as the training center. "Wow," said several teachers, almost in unison. Lisa Werner, KE8BMR of Muckawanago, Wisconsin, earned her technician class license during the week at TI. Experiences like the weather satellite decode opened her eyes to the broad possibilities of amateur radio. "I learned all the different things that can be done with ham radio. I thought it was just talking on the radio before coming to TI," she said. Radio is central to TI, but the goal isn't just to create more hams. It is really about getting radio and radio technology back into the front of mind for students, said ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA. By incorporating radio into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM lessons, the importance of radio communications in all aspects of modern and future life is demonstrated for generations that could take humans to Mars and beyond. We're excited for the future, and especially for the future of the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, said Goodgame. 2025 will be a strong year of growth for the program. We've continued to improve on our strong foundation, and groups like this cohort give us a lot of energy to look forward. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is funded entirely by donations to the ARRL Education and Technology Fund. In the last 3 years, 175 educators have attended the Teachers Institute. There are 7 cohorts of the program in 2024, and the goal is to scale it to 16 for 2025, including taking the Institute on the road to different cities around the country.
The 5th Youth on the Air Camp for the Americas has been scheduled for June 15th through the 20th, 2025. The camp will be held in Thornton, Denver, Colorado, and welcomes young amateur radio operators from North Central and South America. The camper application period will be open online December 1st, 2024 at youthontheair.org. Eligible youth are licensed amateur radio operators between ages 15 and 25. Up to 50 campers will be accepted, and priority will be given to first-time attendees and to youth residing outside of the U.S. Past campers may apply to be considered to serve as leaders during the camp. Potential campers residing outside of the United States are encouraged to immediately begin the process of obtaining the necessary passport and appointment to obtain a tourist visa where applicable, as processing times may extend for several months. For details about the camp and or to sign up for updates by email, visit the camp webpage at youthontheair.org/Denver 2025. Dates and locations for the inaugural 2025 sub-regional camps and the inaugural 2025 Youth on the Air Junior USA Camp for under age 15 will be announced as soon as they are available. For additional information, please contact Camp Director Neil Rapp, WB 9VPG at director@youthontheair.org.
For 70 years, it's been based on its current location, almost in the shadow of the U.S. Capitol. And now the Voice of America's parent, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, has awarded a new lease establishing 1875 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest, as its own future headquarters, the home of the Voice of America. The new location is 3 blocks from the White House in the neighborhood of George Washington University. The agency's move to a modern facility will save taxpayers more than $150 million over the course of the 15-year lease. The organization said in a press release. The relocation will begin in the coming months and occur in phases over the next several years.
If you think that the Straight Key Century Club may have designs on the future, well, you're right. As the club does every year, it is extending an invitation to its members to submit an imaginative and attractive QSL card to be sent out following the annual Straight Key Month activity in January. The K3Y event will mark the club's 19th anniversary. In mid-December, the submitted designs will be presented to club members for a vote. The most popular design will appear on the official K3Y QSL card, and, as before, 12 other top selections will appear in the Straight Key Century Club's print calendar. The popular event, which begins on January 2nd, following the ARRL Straight Key Night, features club members calling CQ from all 13 regional call areas in the United States and from countries in 6 International Amateur Radio Union continental regions. If you don't have a copy of this year's calendar and want to see some of the most popular designs created by members, visit skccgroup.com on the net.
The Australian federal government has handed $51 million to U.S. firm Manta Ray Solutions, LLC, to develop a new Pacific subsea cable. Forming part of Google's Central Pacific Connect initiative, the cable will land at Funafuti, Tuvalu, marking the island's first undersea telecommunications cable. The Tuvalu cable system contract will run until March 31, 2027, while the project is managed by the Australian Infrastructure Financing Facility for the Pacific. Last year, Google was tapped to deploy 2 trans-Pacific subsea cables between the United States and Australia via Fiji and French Polynesia.
Shipwrecks have always fascinated one radio amateur in Wisconsin, but none more than the sinking of a railcar ferry that killed everyone on board in 1922. From the time when he was a youngster, maritime stories and disasters always held a fascination for Nathan Banks, KC9HYY. When he recently learned of the tragic sinking of the SS Milwaukee railcar ferry, the October 22, 1922 disaster hit close to home for this Milwaukee area native. This wasn't like the Titanic, the Andrea Doria, or the Lusitania. This was a local story that held him spellbound. Nathan, who has been a ham for 2 decades, will be on the air for the inaugural special event station N9M from the 21st through the 23rd of October. A special QSL card will be available for those working the station either on SSB, FT8, FT4, and possibly CW. Nathan hopes to spread the word about the ship's long career transporting train cars and the stories about the crew members who died when the vessel was swallowed up by Lake Michigan. There were no survivors. The wreck lies at the lake's bottom, 3 miles offshore, north of Milwaukee.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, your amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air, available as a podcast on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartMedia, and Spotify.
Kees Van Osprey, W0AAE, received the 2024 Hiram Percy Maximum Memorial Award during the ARRL Forum at the North Star Radio Convention, which hosted the ARRL Minnesota State Convention in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota on Saturday, October 5th, 2024. Van Osprey is an active member of the amateur radio community in Minnesota and at Iowa State University, where he is a treasurer of the university's radio club. He is an active in the Minnesota Wireless Association and is regularly on the air with SSB, CW, RTTY, and other digital modes. In 2020, Van Osprey was part of the remote ham radio team that put NU1AW on the air for the IARU HF contest. In January 2024, he operated in the NAQP SSB contest in the single-op low-power assisted category, making over 1,000 contacts in under 9 hours. The Hiram Percy Maximum Memorial Award consists of a $1,500 cash award and an engraved plaque, and is given annually to a licensed radio amateur under the age of 21. The awardee, who must be a current ARRL member, is recognized for their exemplary accomplishments and contributions to the community of amateur radio and the local community. The Hiram Percy Maximum was an early 20th century industrialist and inventor who founded the ARRL as the American Radio Relay League in 1914. ARRL also supports youth involvement in radio and radio technology through the ARRL Youth Membership, the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, and by awarding $725,000 in scholarships each year. Visit www.arrl.org for more information.
And wrapping up our news this week, congratulations were given freely in Tunisia to a young Romanian ham who set a new world record while competing in the 20th International Amateur Radio Union High-Speed Telegraphy World Championship. 13-year-old Ioannis Skutaru, Y08YNS, won a gold medal and broke the record he set last year in the category of call sign receiving. According to the competition's website, his total score of 311,192 points represents his maximum copy speed of, get this, 1,126 characters per minute, an equivalent just exceeding 225 words per minute. An announcement on the championship's website said, "This remarkable achievement showcases not only Ioannis' dedication and skill, but also the talent of the Romanian ham radio community." His father, Lucian, Y08SLC, said that Ioannis has been a ham for little less than 6 years.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on amateur radio repeater systems, streaming on the internet, or on great low-power FM broadcast stations like WGXC-FM, part of the Wavefarm, on 90.7 MHz in Akron, New York, serving Greene County and the southern regions of New York's Capital District. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.